Alrighty, well, hello everyone hi. Apologies in advance. I can hear him a little bit, but hi there. Greetings and set up. And then we're gonna go ahead and jump right in and get started with this one. I think it'll be really fun and get settled and situated. Global Hack Week stream here. So yeah, make sure that you can go ahead and do that. Not on Twitch, my goodness. The MLH Organizer headquarters. Gotten some random spam texts and I've ended up complaining about spam messages. So if you're looking to go ahead and check in, it's on the bottom right here. And really quickly is some of our tools I mentioned. One of our main goals for today is some sort of site, right? So is building out kind of web page, how to lay out and organize things, what we're looking at, and then kind of how to put the whole thing together. Might have a working website, but what will it look like yet? I don't know. But worst case, we can always figure out something beautiful. And hopefully it'll be real fun from there. If you want to follow along with me, have you follow along, ask questions, as generally have a great time. So I'm going to go ahead and share. For those of you who are looking to follow along, code set up here. It's a good starting point for us here on Global Hack Week setup. This is just me. I've had issues with my sound before. Then jump back in. Leave, will come back. That's usually from there. Alrighty, hopefully this is a little bit better. And we'll continue from there. Should not have anything piano sounding on it. Should just be me now. Lovely. Okay, good. Sweet. I had my headphones in as I set up the stream, and I think that always messes with it, and I always forget that it messes with it. But hopefully that is resolved now. It should make it easier for everybody to hear me. Perfect. All right, what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and set up once again kind of our main repository. So I just have Visual Studio Code set up here. This is my personal version of Visual Studio Code. You can start from a blank install if that's where you're at, if you've never worked with Visual Studio Code before. If you have a different ID that you like using better, as long as it can handle basic web development, that should totally fine. So things like WebStorm might be a good idea if you're familiar with the JetBrains suite, or something akin to that, whatever you kind of like that works best for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here. I'm just going to start with a new file, and then I'm going to open up here. I'm going to go to my documents. I'm going to just create a new folder here. I'm going to call it my GHW portfolio. And I'm going to go ahead and press create here. Now, if I open up my website here right now, all I have is just one folder in here. So that's not very exciting. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is begin laying out some of my structure of my files. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up a new file. I'm going to create index.html. That's going to have all of my HTML code. I'm going to create a style.css that'll have all of my CSS code. I'm going to go ahead and create a script.js, right, which will have all of my scripts. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new file also called readme.md, right? And this is enough for me to go ahead and just kind of have the 4 basic files that I'm going to fill with information over the next 2 hours and then going into tomorrow. So to explain what all of these files do, right? If you're not familiar with kind of the main idea behind this live stream, I mentioned a little bit in the announcement on Discord, but not sure how many of you tuned in from those versus Twitch notifications and similar things. So the idea behind this stream is to get us to focus a little bit on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're going back to the basics instead of building with, a web framework. I thought it'd be fun for us to talk a little bit about web development fundamentals. So we have HTML, right, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which is used to actually lay out each section of the website, right? So what is a paragraph? What is a heading? What is a link, right? What is a navigation bar? So on and so forth. We have CSS, which is our cascading style sheets. This is used to actually style the information that we're putting on our web page, right? What is the background color of this? What's the foreground color? Is it bolded? Is it underlined? What sort of information, right? Is there a highlight involved? What happens when I hover over it, right? If it's a link, and things like that. And then we also have JavaScript, right? And JavaScript is used for our scripting. The purpose behind all of the JavaScript that we're going to add here is to allow us to make changes dynamically to our website. So for example, here, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to pull our project data from a list. We're also going to be able to add some toggles for themes. And generally, that's what we're going to go ahead and create. So in this, the goal of this workshop, right, or the whole of these 2 parts of live streams is to build out a blank website completely from scratch, right, using these kind of introductory web development frameworks. And by the end, we're going to deploy it to GitHub Pages so that we have a live portfolio site for you to use. So if you're interested, follow along with me, right? Feel free to go ahead and get it set up. I'm going to push things up on GitHub. You do not have to use version control here if you don't want to. However, like I mentioned, for tomorrow, we will need GitHub Pages. So I'm going to go ahead and get a repository set up. That will involve logging into my GitHub account, which I'm going to go ahead and really quickly do off here. I'll also grab my I got an email from a student. asking me if they can email me the answers to the homework because they're running out of space on their paper, which is, of course, totally fine. Let's get my authenticator app going here. You can't see this step because I'm just trying to log into my GitHub account, and I don't want to just blast my PII out into the ether. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to really quickly take you to my GitHub page. So I'm going to swap tabs, and then I'll show you kind of what we've got going on here. So if you take a look here, right, this is my GitHub profile. So in this case, actually, I should edit this readme.md because I've broken the this section. So I'm going to just go ahead and commit changes. And then there you go. That's my little readme, but that's not besides the point. It was just annoying me how those links were broken. But if we go ahead and open up a new repository in here, I'm going to go into repositories, which you should be able to do whether you have a GitHub account or not. And I'm going to go ahead and click new. I'm going to elect myself as the owner, and then I'm going to go ahead and put GHW portfolio. And then let's see, GHW, HTML, CSS, JS project for GHW, or let's do HTML, CSS, JS project for GHW beginners in January 2026, right? So this is just a brief description that will show up on the repository. For my visibility, I'm going to pick public, right? So you all can see the changes that I'm making. You do not have to pick public. For a template, I'm not going to pick a template. I'm also not going to include any of these other steps. I'm just going to create repository because I actually want to walk you through this lovely setup. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up some of my lovely repository right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a window up on terminal. So I'm going to kind of alternate in between some of my screens here. Gets better as I can get more things done. The same section. So I've just gone ahead and opened up a new terminal window. I happen to be on Mac, right? You can obviously use whatever command prompt works best for you. If you're on Windows, you'll probably use something different than me. Well, you'll use something different than me unless you have a setup in mind. And then I'll go ahead and change directory into my GHW change directory into my documents folder, and then change directory into my GHW portfolio folder, right? So in here, I've just gone ahead and said, hey, right, go ahead and change directory. In other words, go from my home, right, from my home folder to my documents folder to where I've stored this project. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go ahead and initialize GitHub. So I'm going to run git init, and then I'm going to run git add all. So that's going to add, right, git add dot here means add all. That means I'm going to go ahead and commit all of the files. Then I will run git commit -m, and that will be initial commit. Then I will follow the recommended GitHub steps by renaming our branch from master to main. So if you're ever curious on how to do this step, it is git branch -m main. And then I will go ahead and run this command, which just takes into account the link that I have. So I'm saying, hey, git remote add origin. So add an origin, which is this link that I have pointing to my GitHub site. All right, so I'm saying, and then last but certainly not least, I want you to push that information up to my branch, right? So now if I refresh the page on GitHub, and I don't want to make it anticlimactic, so I'm going to make sure that I'm actually sharing my screen here. So when I first started, right, the stream, I had this as my setup. If I now refresh the page, you'll see instead I have a blank README and these 4 files that I've created as my sort of initial commit. This means that for those of you who are looking to follow along at home or who are coming in a little bit later or something in between, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and showcase that that GitHub link here for a second. And that will give you the opportunity to kind of take a look at it as we're continuing on into our live stream. Beautiful. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is I will show you a little bit of what happens in this README file, just to kind of give you a rundown of the very, very basics. The README is a file that you would include in a GitHub repository that showcases to you, important information that you might want anybody looking at your website to know, or looking at your project on GitHub to know, right? So this could be things, about what you're doing, why you're making it, how to install it, so on and so forth. For the purposes of this live stream, we're going to go ahead and keep our README really simple. So we're going to do our title here, right? We write READMEs in Markdown. That's what the MD stands for. So we can use hashtags to determine font size. And then they will automatically be formatted. So this is my GHW portfolio website. And then I will say this repository contains the source code for a personal portfolio website built using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The website showcases project skills and contact information and was created during GHW beginners in January 2026. And I'll just include a different portion about, for example, how to use in here, right? So this could be, for example, a different portion. Apologies for the squeaky toy in the background. If you can hear it, my dog is having a fun time with it. But he is very cute, so we'll forgive him. And then, so in here, we could do something like, right, work through different instructions. Or we could also, as you can see, I have, right, customize the concept by adding HTML to CSS. Using any web hosting service or platform of your choice. In the tutorial, we will be using GitHub Pages, right? And then in here, that's what kind of is a good summary of how to get started. This one is a little bit less technical than what I would kind of traditionally do for a README, and I can show you some other examples if you're interested. And I just realized I wasn't actually sharing me typing into the README. So go ahead and do that really quickly. But I just went ahead and edited my README here. Now, the interesting thing that happens now, and I'm going to go ahead and remove this link here and also remove the check-in banner so that you can go ahead and see a little bit more of that bottom screen, is if I go to my terminal window in here, I can now run those similar commands that I ran in my terminal directly from VS Code. I could have also written them directly in VS Code earlier, but in this case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to showcase different ways to do it. And then the next time we'll commit, I'll show you some of the command line, or not the command line, but the built-in kind of interface tools here within VS Code. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do git add all to say commit all of the changes that I've added. In this case, there's only one file that I've changed, so there isn't much else to add. I'm going to then also say git commit -m and say add description to readme.md, right? This will be a good description. It tells me what file I've changed, how many lines I've changed it to, and then I'll go ahead and do git push to push my changes up. If I follow this link, right, and head to my actual deployment here, you'll see now, and then once again, I have to be really careful about remembering to share and to kind of swap my screens around. I used to have a dual screen set up, but I found it didn't really work as well. So now if you take a look here, right, you can see that my nice little README file is now set up so that you can see all of the information I just nicely typed out into that markdown file. So there you go. That's a really cool portion of that step. Now if I go ahead and return to sharing my screen here, right, and I go back to my README, I've got a ton of different things here to kind of take a look at. So first of all, right, I have my index.html, my style.css, and my script.javascript files, right, that are all kind of empty. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to work through very basic setup of what I want it to look like, kind of to begin. So I'm going to first start the actual HTML file, and this is a great portion here, and you can see my GitHub Copilot's already kind of working on filling this in alongside my VS Code. But doctype HTML is how you're denoting, right, what this file contains and sort of the HTML version that you are using. I'm also going to go ahead and set my HTML language, right? And then in here, it's giving me some setup. So this is metadata that I need to save for my web page, right? This is all goes in my head, right? Which is kind of information that's not going to be shown on the web page itself. I have some information about the width of the device and how to deal with that information. And then also how to connect to my style sheet, right? Which in this case is going to be style.css. The title here is what shows up in that little nav bar, like when you have it open in a new tab, right? It's the actual name of the tab itself. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put my name and then the words portfolio. There you go. So in here, right now it's recommending for me to close the head tag and open and close the body tag, which makes sense for the actual layout of my website. So it's telling me here, this should be kind of what my website looks like here. And now within my body tag, this is what actually shows up on the web page. Now we have to be careful in here because we should already start indenting. You can kind of see on the head portion here, but you want to continue that same process with that body tag. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to make what we call semantic tags here to go ahead and start organizing our code a little bit. So I'm going to add in a header tag. And then what I'm going to do here is we'll see if we do a navigation bar, or for now, I think we can just do a, you can just do a button. So in here, what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with a header, and then we're just going to type in H1, and the H1 will just include my name. All right. So the GitHub Copilot extension that I have installed is already automatically filling in that information based on the name that I've provided up here, right? Which is how I'm able to do this. Now, when it comes to actually previewing my site here, you can see now I can preview index.html, and I've created, right, my lovely little H1 tag. Now, if I change this to H2, right, and change the closing tag corresponding with it, that changes the way that the font looks. H3, I can do this as H1 again, right? And you can see the difference in size as it comes down to continuing on here. And then from here, what I can do is we can work on either adding a navigation bar potentially, right? Or we can work on some other portions of the website. So what would be potentially a good option here is creating a little navigation, right? So I have about me, projects, and contact. This would link traditionally to different pages, right? Which I don't have. So maybe this is not a good portion to kind of keep into our basic website right now. But what instead we could do is we could add in a main tag. And inside our main tag, we'll go ahead and add in some sections. So we have 3 sections, one for about me, one for projects, and one for contact. So if you take a look here, right, what is the suggestion from GitHub Copilot, right? Hello, right? I'm Kari, a passionate web developer with a love for creating beautiful and functional websites. Welcome to my portfolio. Of course, this is not, how I would personally go about describing myself, right? Instead, I might grab something like what is in my GitHub profile or something that is more representative of me. I don't find this one to be, a good representation of who I am. I would not in a million years describe myself as a web developer. Right. right? So what is a good description to include of myself instead? There's a lot of different options. So if I go in here, now I have a good one in here. Kari, very rarely introduce myself with my full name. So computer science, we'll do something like this. Science educator, invested in making the world a better place through high quality technology. We'll do teacher and then education. Perfect. And then we'll do my professional focuses include curriculum development, student engagement, integrating technology into the classroom. We'll do curriculum development, creating mobile and web applications, supporting hackathons, and mentoring students. Great. We'll do creating applications instead of focusing on mobile and web. That does not seem like a good fit here for what I've written so far. Let me just make sure that, yep, still showing my screen. Everything else looks good. Creating applications, and then we have project 1, project 2, project 3. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to reach out via email at whatever, right? So this is kind of the basic layout of my website here. That includes all of the information here that we would expect the website to have. On the bottom here, right outside of main but still inside of body, we can go ahead and add in a footer, right, which would include kind of my copyright claim here, right, which I really like that little copyright symbol, of course. And then also in here is where we would specify our script, right? So we would say script would be script.js. And then in here, right, if we wanted to do an email, right, we could do a span, for example, to highlight my email, which for this example, I'll just do yourname@email.com. Right, and it's even, you can kind of see how GitHub Copilot's even correcting the typos. Like it didn't realize that .com is a email extension. That makes much sense. So decided to go ahead and correct that to .com. So even little things like that, as it does a pretty good job of correcting. So this is my super basic website layout, right, of kind of the main things that I have. Now what I can do in here is now move on to my style.css file, or what I can do alternatively is first show off some of those GitHub features, right? So I can commit my code. If I go into changes here, I'm going to say added basic HTML layout, right? I'm going to go ahead and press commit here. I'm going to press the sync changes button. So this does the exact same steps as doing it on terminal, right? So now if I were to do, git push, I get the alert that everything is up to date because all of the code that I've added is up to date. There's no commits. There's no changes that I need to make. So what I'm going to do next is work on my style.css file here, right, which will let me kind of work through different portions. So what I want to start with is let's get started on some of these. So we have some IDs here of different sections, right? Project, contact, and so on. So I do want to kind of stress these. We'll need these as we begin looking at our CSS code, right? We're not really at the point yet where these will be super helpful. But for now, what we want to do is create some of these in coming up shortly. So what we're going to do now is in our style.css file, all right, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look here. I have, there you go. So next we're going to focus on some of our CSS portions, right? So we'll go ahead and start with is that next part up here. So in here, what I'm going to do is go to style.css, and then you can choose how to organize this section. Personally, right, I like to organize mine in alphabetical order, but to each person kind of their own. So I'll go ahead and start with body. And then I'm going to set a font, which in my case, I'm going to set a slightly darker background color. Like so. And then I can also go ahead and set a foreground color. This will be my text color, which I will set 33 as hashtag 333333, right? So I'll go ahead and set my text color as that light gray. Then what I can do is if I now take a look and preview my index.html file, right? My index.html file doesn't look like it's actually adding any of my styling. Right, so how do I preview index.html with style.css? The best way to check whether my style is even being previewed at all is if I click on index.html and I change my background color to something crazy. You know, I do FF0000, right? I try that and see what happens, right? In theory, my background color here should be obnoxiously bright red, when in reality, right? There you go, right? So you can kind of see what that looks like. So now if I change this back to F9, 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 right, which was my initial color, you'll kind of see this gets a little bit more subdued as we go ahead and refresh the page. And now it's also a little bit easier to tell that gray background. We do have to remember to refresh the page every once in a while and refresh the preview here, which I need to remember the shortcut for that. So let me go ahead and do that. Should be reload window. There you go. Cool. So that will reload the whole page, and then that's how we can also go ahead and make sure that we're creating a preview here. So now if I go ahead and go to style.css, right, this is where I have my body. I can go ahead and add in some header styling as well. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and start with some padding. And for my padding, I'm going to add 2 rem. Right, so if I click on 2 rem here, I can also click on go to definition, which I really like about VS Code. Right, so if I go to the definition, even if it's not giving me the definition for something, right, I can kind of look up what it means. So if I look up rem as an example, right, in CSS, what does rem mean? This stands for the root em, right, which is the measurement to kind of measure everything relative to the font size of the root element, which is the HTML. Right, so by default, HTML set, or most browsers set the font size to 16 pixels. So ordinarily, one rem would equal 16 pixels, but sometimes that might equal 32 pixels. But if I were to change the font size on this HTML element, right, then that would also impact my rem. So that's a different kind of handy dandy way to just kind of keep spacing and padding consistent. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to go ahead and align my text to the center. And then I'm also going to go ahead and do my color. So for my background color, I will pick F463. E5. We'll see what these colors are. These are randomly generated. We'll see. Ooh, I don't know if I like that. And then for my color, for my foreground, I'm just going to do F. I'll stick with white. And now if I go ahead and refresh the page, right, and I take a look at my preview, this is what my initial kind of tab section screen looks like. So already we've got a little bit, of some nice kind of tab looking thing that makes this look a little bit better. At the very least, it's slightly more exciting than just one big blob of font. And what I can do after this is again, so go ahead and add some styling to my main section. All right, so my main, I'm going to go ahead and do my max width. Can be 900 pixels. I'm also going to go ahead and set my margin to be auto. And then let's make sure that we add colons in between our selectors and our values. And my padding, I'm going to add 2 REM. So now if I go ahead and refresh this preview, it's the shortcut again to refresh. Command R, right? Maybe not. There you go. So that's a good example of what my padding would look like, right, for my main section here, as a good rule of thumb. Now, what could I work on next, right? It would be pretty silly for me if I did not add in any padding into my footer. So I could do something similar here. Or for the background color, I could opt for maybe the same color as above. All right, then foreground color, I could opt for something similar, padding, position, width. And now if I go ahead and open up my preview for index.html, right, you'll see something similar. So that once it goes ahead and creates, right, that top and that bottom bar where you can see all of that information. And then in between each section, right, I can also add in some padding. So it looks like I have in here different sections. So what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to change the order of this a little bit as well. So I'm going to move my footer between my header and my main just to keep this file also organized in alphabetical order. And then I'm going to go I'm going to go to section here, and I'm going to just go ahead and set a bottom margin for my sections. So now if I go ahead and preview my index.html again, you'll see there's a little bit more breathing room in between each tab as we go through and hover it. Maybe 2 REM is a little bit too much, so I might opt for 1 REM instead. And I can go ahead and see the effects of that as I open it up, especially on this section here. Now for my footer, right, I don't think padding 1 REM around it is all a good idea. That's what kind of made that section of it look clunky. So I can go ahead and click here, right? And then let's see. So that's actually not that helpful either. But as the website fills up more, we'll have more information in here that we can store, which will be really helpful as well. Now what we'll go ahead and do next is let's work on kind of getting started and adding some of the portions of here. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'm going to go ahead and anonymize my lovely little portfolio. So instead of going with myself, I'm going to go ahead and pick a different name. I'm going to pick John Doe. And then in here, I'm also going to change his name to John Doe again. And then about me, hello, I'm John. And then I'll let it come up with a better description for what John might do. John Doe, a passionate software developer with a love for creating innovative solutions. I enjoy working on web development projects and exploring new technologies. Great, awesome. So in here, what we could have is some of the sections, right? So we have about me, which is this section. And then in here, we could also include a subsection, potentially about him being a software developer and web enthusiast as a good example / launching off point. If we go ahead in here, right, we've got projects that he worked on, and then also a list of contacts. And then the footer I will leave with my own copyright, and we'll continue from there. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and hop into my style.css, right, where you can kind of see some of these lovely examples, right, for layout. And then I can go ahead and start off with maybe some of the main ideas that I also want to incorporate in here. So what I'm going to do to start here is I'm going to now go ahead and head to script.js, which is where I'm going to work on a little bit of my portion for my list of projects. So what I'm going to do here to start is I'm going to go ahead and start with a list of projects that Mr. John Doe has created, right? So for his list of projects, his project ideas will all be listed here, right? So this is his 3 projects, and then I want to create a display project list, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say, get the list of projects by going to each project, right? And then creating an element for a project card, which will have that kind of project information. So cards for each project, const. So I'm going to go ahead and continue here. And that's what we'll end off here with. And then in here, we'll go ahead and add the event listener. And then from this point, what we can say is if I now preview index.html, right, you can see I have these lovely little task cards, right? So instead of this project section, what I would ideally replace this section with would be my project list. So instead of now my section ID project, I'm going to leave this projects tab, but then I'm instead going to do div ID and then let's make sure that this one should be projects and then end the div here. So this is how I get that nice, lovely little list of projects. So that's how I get this little handy dandy information, which is great, right? So that could be a good kind of portion of things, kind of important things to know. As you can see, my JavaScript is now loading last, right? I've now added code to all of my lovely files that you can kind of see here. What I can do with my links, right, is I could eventually replace them, right, with links to real projects or real sites or something similar. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say push MVP for HTML, CSS, and JS files. Good. And so I'm going to go ahead and commit these and then sync these changes up. And then what I'll do next is I'll go to my GitHub page over on github.com. And then what you can see in here is if I go ahead and share my screen and open up my web browser, you can see, right, all the changes that I've made in the last few minutes versus earlier today, right? Like my initial commit was about 25 minutes ago, or in reality, it was a little bit longer than that, right? But my README commit was 25 minutes ago, and my pirate commit was 30 minutes ago. All right. I'm going to go ahead and take a super quick break so I can go ahead and use the bathroom because I forgot that I needed to pee before I started the stream. But I will be back in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, if you're looking for things to get caught up, I'm going to go ahead and give you all another link to my repository. So for those of you who are looking to take a look
and make sure that you're kind of caught up. That's what we're looking for you to kind of have in the next few minutes. And then if you've got any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them in the chat now. And I'll go ahead and get back to them as soon as I come back, which should be really, really soon. So I'll be right back. Thanks for a good solid start to part 1 so far. There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Hope you all got a chance to also get whatever you need to get done. Let's jump right back in. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. And then, do I have a little coding buddy? Oh, hello, my coding buddy. What's up? Oh, you're so cute. Sorry, my dog came to say hi, so you can kind of see his tail in the corner there, blending in with my blanket. Good trooper. Alrighty, let's see. What I'm going to go ahead and do next is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go back to my VS Code, and we'll kind of jump right back in to what we've been working on. So in here, right, you can see some of my super basic layout with my index.html, right, my index.html, my style.css, and then my blah, 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 my script.js file. So what I want to do now is I'm going to just go ahead and set up in here some of the things that I want to change for some of the fun features that I want to talk about. So in here, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to open my index.html file here. And what I want to do is we'll build out the ability to toggle in between light mode and dark mode. So I'm going to go ahead and do class equal to light mode. Yeah, come back. So I'm going to go ahead and do light mode here as my class. And then in here, what I'm going to do is I have my paragraph, right, my little header right in this section. Actually, I'm going to put mine in the footer because I think it'd be much more fun. But right in here, I'm just going to create a little button. And then I'm going to say my button ID theme is going to be theme toggle. And then this will be toggle dark or light mode, right? So that's what we'll go ahead and add in here. Right, so that's my little button in here. What now I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a couple of things. I'm going to go to my style.css, and I'm going to introduce some variables here for my fonts. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and add in some root styling. So I'm going to set my primary color. Right, so my background color, we're actually going to set to F9, F9, F9. My text color, we are going to set to 333, 333. And then my primary, we're going to set to this purple. And then my secondary color, we'll set to F3, F3, F3. All right, so just a nice, slightly lighter shade of white. And actually, we won't need a secondary color on second thought. So we're just going to go ahead and remove this, and we'll continue with that color from here. Now, what we can also do is I can add in some styling for dark mode. So what I'm going to do in here is also add in body dot. Okay, cool. We're still in the same spot. I'm also going to go ahead and add in body dot dark, all right, which will set my dark mode. And that dark mode is going to have different text color. So my text color in that case will be F9, F9, F9. And my background color will be 33, 33, 33. And then my primary color will still be this nice little light purple highlight. We'll see how that shows up with the black text, but we can always figure it out. So in here, if I go into my body, right, I will leave my margin and my padding, except I want to vary the order here. So I'm going to leave my background color, my color. And then in here, what I'm going to do is instead of leaving these as my background color, I'm going to do var background color and var text color up the top. And then I'm also going to add font family, not font size. We'll do Arial and it's sans serif and 0 margin, 0 padding. So that looks a little bit more accurate. If I go ahead and refresh my preview here, right, you'll kind of see what the differences are here. There's not a huge ton, but this is what you can kind of see the differences are or what those may look like, right? So you can also scroll my page here. So there you go. But what if I can go ahead and do next? So I'm going to close out of this tab. And now I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of my styling here. So my background color, I'm going to replace with var primary color. My color here, I'll replace with guess just plain white. That seems strange. I'll replace it with text color. And the text line position width. I want to make sure that I'm preaching, writing as I preach. And I've been focusing a lot with my students on making sure that their CSS is organized. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm doing as I preach, if you will, and organizing these in order that makes sense. And then in here, it's already recommending for me to swap these out. And so now if I click on my little preview tab and I go back, right, you can kind of see what that looks like in terms of my actual file here, right? So this is kind of what my actual beautiful little layout looks like. Now, what I can do is also work a little bit with what we call flex boxes here, right? So instead of focusing on, oh, great question. How are you deciding what makes sense reorganization? I generally, and this is, you know, different people have different approaches to this. I like to stick with alphabetical order, although I will make exceptions. For example, I don't like separating like color properties. So if I get a background color and a color, even though I have bottom, right, which naturally would make sense for it to go in between those two, I'm going to elect to put that one closer to the top here, just so I can keep these two together. So I usually go alphabetical order within these. Some people will go like order of importance, right? Like start with colors, then go with, you know, like padding and margin, then go with any other properties. But for me, I like some variation of like keeping margin and padding together, keeping background color and color together, and then sticking with alphabetical order otherwise, right? Which sometimes, you know, it doesn't work out that way. But like for these, for example, what I would do is probably realistically background primary text, just to kind of make it easier for my brain to organize. But, you know, there's kind of the beauty is that you get to decide what you want it to look like on yours. And then for these, mostly anything with like that, you know, like that modifier, that colon modifier, I would stick to the very top. Modifiers like body, dark mode, and body. I've seen both of these kind of alternate in different ways. I usually would do like body and then any modifiers down here, right? Like the same way that if I had a hover tag, I'd do the same thing here. And then in these, I usually just stick with alphabetical order, but I've also seen people do like order of appearance. So like header before main before section, right? Section, footer down here, right? Whereas I put my footer back up here. I just find it easier to keep things kind of organized if they're in alphabetical order, but to each their own, of course. And that was a really good question. And then as we go ahead and jump in here, I'm going to go ahead and head to my section here, and I'm going to use my project list section here, and I'm going to try to create a flex box. So in here, I'm going to do a flex display with a gap of 1 rem and a flex wrap. And then if I go to my index.html, and in here, what I'm instead going to do instead of hashtag project list, I'm actually going with hashtag projects. All right, so I can modify that class. And now if I take a look at this file and open up that preview for index.html, you'll see some of that preview information that shows up, right? Where I can kind of see where my projects show up, right? Where they can either be individual cards like this, right? Or they fall into the tab one at a time, right? So portfolio, website, task manager, app, block, platform show up like this. If I'm on a full screen website, like if I'm on a mobile phone, they would kind of fall in here. If I'm on a full screen website, they would take up the full screen. So that's the idea behind that. Now, if I jump in here, right, what I can also add, just to demonstrate another portion here, is I'm going to go ahead and add in the skills section. And then there you go, right? Just my little skills here. Apparently, I know JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. React, Node.js, and Python. Sure, I feel like that's a solid option. And then we have our contact me, right? And then my email. And then you can go ahead and see all those other options in there. Now, what I can also do is if I go to my style.css, what I've also done before is added styling for span, right? So background color, maybe do var, primary color, and then font weight bold. So this way, if I go into my index.html and I try to preview it, you'll see as I kind of scroll all the way down, for some reason it's not letting me, right? Which would probably be something that is worth exploring as to why it's not letting me actually scroll all the way down. All right, because I can't actually take a look at those. And also my button doesn't work. So some things to keep in mind here for, bugs that we're kind of already running into. But we've got our contact, right? And then our button. What I could also do is do our button below it. And then actually in here, when I would do my footer tag, I would do my color here being my background color, which is pretty funny. And then in here, I also want to actually stick with my color being my background color as well. There you go. Now if I preview index.html again, I think we should see slightly better results. Right, so there you go. In terms of actual viewership, this part with the contact me is still probably a little bit of an eyesore, but we can go ahead and figure that out as we continue on today. So then in here, I'm going to go back to my style.css. I'm going to take a look down here, right? My span has some extra styling that I want to take a look at. And then in my projects, I also have some designs that I can add for an actual project card. Right, so I can create a border, right, with border radius and padding, and then different widths, as well as potentially maybe a box shadow, right? So in this case, what I would do is potentially a little box shadow, not box SRC, box shadow of box dash shadow. There you go. 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 3 pixels. Something like so. And now if I were to preview my index.html again, well, nothing happened. So that's fun. Let's take a look at the .project card here. That is because I named my script.js card something else, didn't I? Yeah, project. So in here, what I would do instead is instead of going in here, I want to do project like so. And if I go to index.html preview again, that looks a little bit better. So there you go. That's a good example of like what I could look for in terms of a little project card, right? That has some sort of information that would display up in it, which is pretty cute, right? A nice little sweet addition here that we can go ahead and add. And then in here, what I could also do is add a little hover, right? So I could do a .project hover. Yeah, so that's when I run my my cursor over it. And in this case, I have an example of something that I could try is a transform with a translate y, which is quite interesting, of -4 pixels. Right, so now if I preview index.html, let's see what actually happens. Right, it pushes it up when I hover it over. So there you go. So we could also do -4 rem or -0.5 rem. Sure, 0.5 rem is fine. Right, and that preview.index.html, right, just so we're sticking with rem consistently, that would make it go up about 8. So if I did 0.25, it would be about 4 again. It would create a similar effect. Now in here, what I could do is I could also go ahead and add in my button tags and my A tags for any of my links. So for my button, right, which I'm actually just going to go ahead and put up here. For my button, I'm going to do some padding. So my padding will be 0.5 REM and 1 REM. I'm also going to give it a border radius of, let's do 2.5 REM. And now do a no border. And then for cursor, I'll try pointer. So now if I go to index.html, I do run another preview, you'll see what my new button looks like, right? And you can see how the cursor also now changes to a pointer, which is very fun. All right, the small little things and kind of how they affect our site and what they do can be nice little finishing touches. And then in here, we also do have links. And so for my links, right, which are covered in A tags, I'll pick my foreground color to be that primary color. And then I want no text decoration. So what that looks like is getting rid of the underline, right? But now if you look here, you can see the actual links to my project, if you will. Right, so there you go. Those are my different options for things that I've kind of created, right? My example of what would be a good option for creating the site. Now let's take a look at this footer here. I'm really curious as to see what is happening with the bottom of this web page and why it's not letting me scroll here. I have a feeling it has to do with the footer code here with this bottom, right? Like I'm freezing it to the bottom here. So if I try to preview index.html now, want to see what happens? Well, now my footer's gone entirely. So that's cute, I guess. So let's see, maybe position fixed. And that'll be it. Let's try to comment that portion out instead and then run a new preview. I have to find a better way to run the preview here. Yeah, so there you go. Now it shows up here. If I get rid of position fixed. If I try to add back position fixed, is that what's causing it to not be able to scroll all the way down? Looks like it. Which is quite unfortunate because I do quite like it. I think it looks better with position fixed. Although I am going to go ahead and add in some padding just around of about half REM. So now if I go ahead and run index.html and run that preview, you'll see it looks a little bit better down here in my personal opinion for what I'm looking for. So there you go. A little bit better here, right, in terms of like what we're looking for our code, and then your name at email.com. What I can do now is instead of a span here, I could do an A tag, and then I could do href would be mailed to at yourname.com, and then get rid of that other tag here. And that's how I can get it to show up and look like a link the same way that it looks like an email here. So that's a good potential, addition to our site. Let's go ahead and push up these changes. So let's do some additional HTML and CSS features. And I'm going to go ahead and commit and then push this change up. And there you go. So then what I'll do next is I'll go into script.javascript or script.js, and we'll dive a little bit more into some of these features. I'm going to go ahead and go get a jacket. It's freezing cold in my apartment. So I'll be right back. I'll be right back. Alrighty. There you go. I'm back. It's slightly warmer in my little MLH coat. Jacket. Jean jacket thing. It'll help just even a little bit. Anyway, where were we? So as we jump into our script.js, we've got our data steps here and then our document steps to actually render these lovely little documents. right? So in this case, we're creating the elements, right? And then undergoing them this way. There's other ways in which we could create these. But what I want to do now is I want to work on this little toggle button, right? So what I'm going to do next is, before I do the get event. There you go. Oh my goodness. So that will be the document.add event listener. Interesting. So we'll go ahead and do right down here is what am I looking for? What am I looking for? I am looking for I want to keep this separate. This project section. Yeah. Is a function to display actual project. And then display the actual projects. Yes. So what I want to do now is we're probably going to actually do this down here. So I'm going to do the theme toggle button, and I'm going to go ahead and get the theme toggle, and then I'll add the event listener on click, and then toggle dark mode or light mode. And then from here, right now, if I preview index.html, see what that looks like. I click on my little button, right? I can toggle between light mode and dark mode, which is pretty cute, right? So that's what that looks like as an example. But in here, if I go to script.js, right, or if I take a look at, what is it? Style.css, actually, not script.js. What I'm noticing is that in dark mode, right, I don't like the gray text on the background here. So what might make more sense instead is if I, in the dark mode version, stuck with a background color, primary color, and text color, right? Of course, being those. And then in here, right, background color, primary color, and text color. What I can instead do is do potentially a heading color, right? Which would be that F9, F9, F9 as well. And then from here, right, that would be the same. It wouldn't matter if it was light mode or dark mode, right? And I would also, once again, kind of think about how I'm organizing these. Boom, 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 boom. And then across this heading, delete this up here. Right, correct, perfect. And then F9, F9. And now in my header, just where I call my color, just stick with my heading color here instead of my background. And I think that should have an overall positive difference. So now when I preview my index.html, I'll stick with my white. I need to change it on footer as well. So style.css, in my footer code, it's going to be my color will stick as my heading color as well. So there you go. Right, so that's potentially how I could vary my... Oh, I can turn off the quick break banner footer. You are so right. Let's put back ask questions in the chat. And then thanks for taking breaks when you know it's not took like newbies to do self-care while coding. Oh, absolutely. Also, I get cold very easily. I woke up at 5:15 a.m. today because I teach. So I have to be at work at 6:55 and I got to walk the dog. And it's pushing 7:15 at this point. So I've been awake for well over, 13 hours. Worked for most of it. And the time that I didn't spend working, I spent taking care of something. My little programming buddy. So, it is important, right, that you take breaks here and there. Although I'm pretty bad at it, so maybe don't trust me as a resource generally, but I am pretty much, I've learned a lot about that as a good lesson in the last couple of months or so. Besides, it'll be 15 seconds to grab a jacket, right? I'll be in and out, and my quality of life is so much improved that I'm not shivering, right, as I sit at my desk. Alrighty, so what we can do next is think about potentially adding some other cool resources. And we actually get our little basics deployed today. So what we can do now is I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes. So I will say added light plus dark mode toggle, and I'll get these committed and pushed up, right? So now if I go ahead and take a look here, let's see what is a good point for us to continue here. So go to style.css. I've got a bunch of really cool stuff here, which makes sense. What I could also do is I could go ahead and create little sub pages potentially here. We could also go ahead and create potentially some tabs. There's kind of a lot of different options here. So let's think about, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and think of some ideas here. And then in here, what I'm going to do is potentially do some navigations and Google Fonts. Yes, those will be really fun. Let's stick with these. So in here, what I'm going to do is we're going to go back into our HTML, and I'm going to go up into our title here. And I'm going to try to add a navigation tab, right? So my navigation, I'm going to do about me, project, skills, and contact, right? So this is going to be my little navigation section. So there we go. Okay, so it should be outside the header, which makes sense. And then above the main, potentially. Yeah, there you go. That'll be a good spot to put it. We want to make sure like this is nabbed over. And then in here, right, and then that goes into my main section. And then in here, what I want to do is I'm going to go into style.css, and I'm going to work on some of my navbar styling. So I'm going to add this to the bottom here. I'm going to do .navbar, except it's not called navbar, is it? It's called nav. Yeah. So if I go to nav here, I don't even have a class. So I'll just call it nav, not vav, nav. There we go. So style.css.nav. And then we'll do in here, we could do background color for my primary color. Yes. Padding 1 rem. And then we could try, instead of text alignment, yeah, text alignment should work. And let me try then position. We'll do sticky, right? So it's going to stay at the top. Top will 0. And then we'll also try flex display. And then justify content to center, 1 gap, background color, padding. And then we'll do a border. So we'll do border bottom. And we'll try 1px solid in my heading color. So now if I preview index.html, what this actually looks like is this right here, right? So that's my little sticky tab, right? So that lets me scroll through these here. The only issue is that my text is all in the purple, which is not very good. So my background color is primary color, right, which doesn't make much sense. And then my border bottom is 1 pixel in my heading color, which also doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So is it showing us text color here? That would make no sense. So instead of primary color here, I think let's stick with heading color. And then we'll also do the border and heading color as well. So now if I preview index.html, get about me, project, skills, and contact, right? And then I can toggle light on dark mode and then get about me, project, skills, and contact. This is why. These are highlighted in text. So I actually don't want the text here. I want to be doing that. So I want to make sure that the regular color also stays as heading color. So I want to stick with var being heading color as well. So now if I go here, right, and I go ahead and preview index.html, right, this is what my subsection here looks like. I toggle dark mode, and this is what I get, right? The only issue is this dark mode is not very dark mode-y, which makes sense considering pretty much all of it is written in heading color. So in here, right, instead of maybe sticking with heading color, then we could do text color. Let's try that, maybe, or maybe background color. Like if I try background color is background color, color is heading color. Like if I try this, now I preview it, what does that look like? And then I flip this back. Ooh, no. So if I go to style, background color, my var is, well, background color is supposed to be white. So that makes no sense. So I'm missing something. So yeah, my background color here becomes black, which makes sense. And then my heading color is still white. My primary color is still black. I think instead I want to stick with primary color here. And then my color of the text should be heading color. So now if I preview, should be, the text is, because it's in A tags. Yep, that will do it. My A tags are set to style in that color either way. So in this case, I think what makes sense is probably just sticking to background color. And then this color should be text color. And this color should be text color. See that? Let's see what that looks like. There's a lot of different options here. Obviously that could work, but see how I like it. You know what? It works. We'll stick with that for now. I think it's a solid compromise for the actual sticky design. And we can always improve the actual design. And then nav bar. Ooh, I can add in I can add in the actual like styling for the nav bar for the actual like link of it. Yeah, I knew there had to be a way to do that. There we go. Style.css. So what I want to do now is .nav and all of the A's. So I'm going to do var text color, font weight bold, text decoration none. Sure, that works. And then in here, P. So then as we do padding, it's going to be 0.5 REM, 1 REM. And then we can also try border radius of 999 pixels. And then font size, I'll do 0.9 REM. And then in here now, if I go ahead and preview index.html again, we'll see what that looks like here, right? So, fun. So I can click on these. Skills content. Sticky's a little bit broken here. If you take a look here as we kind of scroll from the top to the bottom. Also, why does it highlight in orange when I click on it? Terrible. So actually, I don't think I'm going to keep this one here for a second. I don't think that's a good idea. I want to make sure in here, okay, in my CSS file here. So in between this one, I'm also going to add an HTML modifier here. I'm going to add in smooth scroll. And then smooth scroll is just, lets me scroll on this site, I assume smoothly. Am I correct in that assumption? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. That's a little bit better. It's obviously not ideal, especially as we get to these sections up here. But then in here, if your nav doesn't, yeah, okay. I'm going to try the index of 10 here and see what happens. So now if I go back to index.html and then I try to preview it, there we go. Okay, that's what gets rid of that weird little thing. I knew I was missing something. So there you go. So that does our z index. There we go. And that's that. So we've got all of our little skills here highlighted and everything on there looks good. Now let's see here. This is hover effect and smooth scrolls and so on. And there we go. You could also do active link highlights and so on and so forth and focus on mobile friendly stuff. I think this is a good stopping point. And then let's see if we can get this lovely page deployed onto GitHub pages. So cool. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to take a look here. I'm going to commit these, except I forgot to add in a commit message. So I'm going to just say finish part 1 changes. I'm going to go ahead and close this file and then sync my changes up. There you go. So in here, right, what we've got is, first of all, we're going to double check our repository goods. Looks good. We have index.html. We are going to go ahead and head to our GitHub repository. So I'm going to go and do a quick transition back to my portfolio. So if I go here, go to repositories and go to GHW portfolio, I'm going to stop sharing my VS Code. I'm going to start sharing my web browser because that's what we'll need for probably close to the remainder of this stream. And as we jump in here, remember where I said, as you were making a repository, that you can pick whether it's public or private. If you do not have a GitHub student subscription or GitHub student developer pack, which if you don't, you really should get it. But if you, for some reason, don't have it and you're waiting to get approved or something similar, you will need your repository to be public in order to publish it on GitHub pages. So what we're going to do now, right, is we're going to go ahead and set up our actual GitHub pages. So I'm going to go into my settings tab here. I'm just going to make sure everybody can see things. Yes. And then in my settings tab, I'm going to click on pages. And then under build and deployment, I'm going to pick source deploy from a branch. And then I'm going to pick for my branch, I'm going to pick main, and my folder is going to be my root. And I'm going to click save. And then in here, right, it's telling me it's being built on my branch here. and then we'll continue from there. So let's make sure that our website works correctly. We'll give it about 1 minute to make sure that it gets started. And then if we go into our code and we take a look at our deployments, you can go ahead and take a look at our deployment details here. So our build has succeeded, right? Our report build status has now also succeeded, and our deployment has now also succeeded. So just to give it a test run, and it may not work yet, I'm gonna go ahead and click on deployments here and check on it here. And there you go, right? So we have our lovely little website, right? Which has all of my lovely little information for things that we've worked on so far. Lets me toggle my light or dark mode, right? And then continues on from here, right? So that's my lovely little example. Now, what are some changes that I could potentially make, and what are some improvements I could potentially make here? Now, the really cool thing about my GitHub Pages deployment is that now, as soon as I push up my code, it actually gets updated in my real life version of the app. So I have some, dynamic features and some things that I can change. One of the things I want to fix is I don't like how the projects tab actually go through and do it. So we're gonna go ahead and fix up some lovely sections here. So in my, I have some time to add in some fun navigation things. Why not? And so now if I've preview index.html too, I can see the little project skills contact sections, right? Pretty fun. There we go. But also in contact here, I want to make sure that when we click on the little nav link here, right? So the stuff that we commented out, I want to actually make sure that it gets like a nice little border. So in here, it would be the border 1px solid var primary color. I'm going to go ahead and try that, right? So if I now go to index, preview it, and then go from here, right? That shows up only when I click on it, right? So potentially what I could do here, right, is then try to see if I could change the color at some point. But that might be a later thing for us to work on anyway. Now if I go to style.css, I don't think that this is actually a good idea. So I could go to readme.index.html preview here. Now I can click on it. So I still get the little border, which is quite interesting. It's in orange for some reason. But I wonder if I get rid of that border color or that border section. I'm assuming that's what's going to get rid of the border, like when I click on it, actually. Oh, no, it does it. It just does it in a square. That's so interesting. Style nav border and clicked on. Let's try to figure this out. So it should be .nav unit active portion. Really? Does that even accomplish anything? Or it's not actually doing anything when I click on it here. It's not active. It needs to be this part. And then index.html preview here. No, that's not doing much. So, I would need to keep track of the activity in JavaScript. Does that make sense? I go in here and I go to script.js. I go through and do a document. No, not that. Try this. That still didn't do anything. Why is there a random orange border when I click on it? I hate that. I really hate that. I really, really do. I don't want to do server-side logic. Maybe the dot focus? Probably. Let's try that instead. So I'm going to remove the script.js things that I just added because we don't want to keep that actually in reality. And then here, if I go to style.css, and then I would do .navlink focus outline none, maybe. Except it would not be .nav, it would be .nav focus outline none. Let me just double check that I know that is correct here. That's not none. Yeah. Nav.focus. Or maybe it would need to be all of these index.htmls would need to be in its own class. So if I did like class would be navlink, that might work, right? And now if I did .navlink dash focus and then did border bottom 2px solid and then tried var primary color outline none. Let's see if that would work then. Now if I go to index.html, review. Now, let's see, I'm just going to close this out. Preview this again. There we go. Okay, I got it. Amazing. Sweet. That is a nice little change. That is definitely a nice little change. Okay, perfect. And then what else do I want to add in really, really quickly? I had a couple of ideas still. The changing this because I don't like that. And then so if I look in here and then div ID, I already have my flex container here. So what I want to do, I'm assuming, is add some styling to my H2 here. So I'm going to do hashtag projects H2. And then instead of setting the width, I just want to do margin bottom. I do 1.1 rem here. And then I could also theoretically refactor that section so that it's a little bit more breathing room, especially because I don't think that actually fixed it. It sure as didn't. Right? Am I correct in saying that? I sure am. That's so fun. Let's see here. Style.css projects. Are they called projects here? They are. Section ID. So maybe instead of section ID, I would do, and then, div class, section header. Right, and then this ID here. Yeah. And now if I do styles.css, and then I would do, instead of products H2, I could do dot section header, and then do that. It would be element PQRS TUV. So it'd be down here in dot section header. And now if I went ahead and tried this again, went in here, did this preview. And that didn't actually fix my issue though, which is the annoying part. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to push up these changes, and I'm going to say, complete part 1 changes, small fix 2 cards. Yeah, cards remaining. All right, and then I can go ahead and press enter here, close this tab, send these changes up. Why do I feel like, okay, I have been sharing my screen, which is good. And then what I will go ahead and do is if I preview the page live on GitHub, right, once it deploys in a short moment, then I can see whatever my change actually went through, right? So now if you see, I can look at my pending checks, which I'll go ahead and really quickly show you. So now if I go to my window, right, and look at my deployments, we're in the middle of building, report build status, perfect. And then my deployment should be ready in just a few seconds. And there we go, right? So now if I go ahead and go to code, click on GitHub pages, right? I can go ahead and also look at the last deployed now, right? Didn't actually fix the main thing that I had issues with, right? Because, it looks fine if I make it really, really small. And even then it doesn't, because my main issue is that the project section here starts like it's a separate thing. So I almost wonder if I should make them separate sections. Like if that will fix what I wanted to do programmatically. So that's worth a shot actually. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here real quick. I'm gonna give this a stab and we'll see if that's the last thing I can get done before the end of the stream. So if I go in here and go to my index.html, I'll do this section header as project and the div, and then end the section. And then start a new section in here. And then I'm going to call this section ID projects. And then in here, I can then do div ID as that one. And now if I go ahead and do a preview, right, in theory, okay, I now just have a weird indentation on the left side here, right? Like if I scoot this, but I think that's more fixable because in reality, if I go to style.css and I remove the section header portion, and then maybe the, now if I try to redo that, will it work? Still no. Let's figure out why this is. Definitely has to do over style.css. Maybe my gap or my display. So it's projects. This is the actual project here. Maybe the gap here is what I need to get rid of. So if I now go ahead and press this one. Okay, there we go. So that's adding the section down there to the styling. But if I go into style.css here, I'm sure there's a way for me to add some margins to the bottom of this guy. And now if I do some margins on either side, 0.5 rem. Now if I go to index.html, I redo this. There we go. That's so much better. Okay, amazing. And now if I, try it in lots of different layouts, doesn't actually work with the card feature as well, but it does actually work on the cards. I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to go ahead and push this up as finished part 1 and then commit these changes, sync these up. And then this is a great time to kind of begin transitioning off to the end of our stream. So first of all, thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate all of those of you who came in late or stuck around. Either way, you being here is always very appreciated. So there's a couple of things that we need to talk about before we end and move on to the next thing that we have going on. First and foremost, if you have not yet gotten a chance to grab the repository for this week's stream, especially if you missed a portion or part of or all of part 1, and you're especially looking to get started and join us on part 2, make sure that you go ahead and grab the repository located right on the link right below me right now, so that you can get all of the information that you might need. What else do we have going on today? So let's start with talking a little bit about the schedule. So looks like I am the last person. No, I am not. All right, beautiful. Looks like we've got Jocelyn actually coming on in just about 12 short minutes, talking about embedded systems, which will be really fun. So definitely make sure to stop by and say hi. And then we've got Alberto going on for MongoDB 101. That should keep you busy for the next 4 hours. My dog fell asleep under the bed and his head is peeking out really funny from the corner. Sorry, that was very entertaining. But as I was saying, make sure to go say hi to Jocelyn and Alberto. They'll be live for the next 4 hours. Jocelyn's coming on in 12 minutes, and then Alberto will be on straight after her. So it's a great way to finish up your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. And, gives you something to do for the next couple of hours until you get to see me tomorrow, same time. So no matter where you are in the world, just same time tomorrow, 24 hours later from when we started, 24 hours from now, 22 hours from now-ish, you'll get to see me for part 2. And honestly, I had a stream plan that ended with most of the stuff that we got done today. So we're going to mess around and make something cool here. I think we maybe can come back with some specific portfolio ideas, or if there's specific things you want to see, feel free to, mention it to me, send in the Discord or something similar. Feel free to, give me an @ really quickly, and I can look at it before tomorrow. And so if you have specific things that you want to look at with websites, let me know. If you ended up making your own and you want to share it with me, let me know. Last but certainly not least, before you go ahead and head out, take a break before you go see Jocelyn, make sure you go ahead and give us some feedback over at mlh.link/GHW feedback. And so that just is a link that we use to, gather your thoughts and opinions and constructive criticism for any streams that you might have watched. If you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please let me know. I always appreciate receiving really positive stream feedback. If you have anything that you wish we would have done differently, also please let me know. And on that note, I'm going to make sure that we can look at our beautiful finished. That's better. Why is it still dead to the other way, though? That's so wrong. Well, you know what? It'd be like that sometimes. That's one of the first things we'll do tomorrow is we'll fix up that styling. But yeah, make sure that you've gone ahead and given me some feedback, some positive or otherwise. Always appreciated. It helps me, deliver more fun content for you in Global Hack Week land, and generally just makes me have a good time here. And that is everything that I officially have for this lovely Global Hack Week. I will see you all in 22 short hours for part 2. And in the meantime, get some rest, do something fun, happy hacking, and have a good rest of your day. Bye, everybody.